Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners and viewers, coast to coast, the Gulf to the 51st state, and around the globe. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on video channels everywhere. Please send this link on if you have anybody who you think might enjoy it or might gain some information from it. And hit that like, hit that subscribe, really helps us out. And give us a little bell, those little bell icons that they have on the various sites so that you know when these shows come out. Since we're not on a set schedule, although I'm doing pretty good at getting 1 to 2 out a week. It's just not on quite the days that I project. Anyway, we're going to have a little rant story. We're going to have a little quote, which I think is apropos for this show. And this show is the final in our real estate series. This is on commercial, industrial, and retail real estate around the United States. And you might think, what the hell does that have to do with me? I want to get my 40 acres with a creek, or I want to buy my new house in town, or whatever it is. It has a lot to do with you. Let me tell you why. Number one, the commercial markets, the commercial real estate markets affect the bond markets. And the bond markets, if you've been listening at all to mainstream media, their usual siren cries, are, should we say, unstable. Okay, they're not doing well. And the bond markets determine mortgage rates, which affects you directly. And it affects bank loans and car loans, which affects you directly. Commercial real estate is all tied into this because lots of banks have financed commercial real estate, particularly the regional banks. And when the banks start seeing the value of their collateral go down or the income go down because of vacancy levels rising, they tend to restrict lending and raise rates. And that absolutely affects you. It might even affect your credit cards, depending upon what the bond market does. More importantly, what's happening in commercial real estate in various markets around the United States has a direct impact on your residential real estate. I have some really interesting stats for you, even if you're not an industrial, retail, office guy or gal, but you'll find these kind of fascinating. And in my research, which was kind of eye-opening, I found that, shall we say, the demise of commercial real estate, while it's definitely been impacted adversely, is much overcried. That's my opinion after doing the research. But you can listen to the stats, some of which are astounding, and you can decide for yourself. And we will tie it all in on how this affects you in all those various components. And it does. Whether or not an office building is vacant in New York City and what it sells for, or what's happening with the lender who has the loan on it, affects you. Trust me. Like directly, okay? You may not see it, but you will feel it in your pocketbook. Okay, so let's start with a rant story, shall we? I've been telling you how dry it is out in this neck of the woods, literally from the Mexico-New Mexico border, way down south, all the way up to southern Montana, at least on the eastern side. And this place is no exception. Well, we were blessed by a really wet 8 to 10 inch snowfall a few days ago. It's one of the reasons this show is a few days past when I projected. And it was a pile of moisture, 2.2 inches of moisture in one storm. That's a lot. Now, that doesn't do anything to relieve the drought overall, but it sure was a gift. And this particular little valley nestled in the Laramie Mountains got more than just about anybody else. So unfortunately, a lot of the other drought-stricken areas, they got some precip, but they didn't get anywhere near what we got up here at the ranch. Anyway, we've been running around the last few days trying to manipulate water to cover more ground. We actually got two fields mostly covered, and I have to go back. I'm still in my ranch stuff here, otherwise I wouldn't even be getting this show out. No time to dress up for you. Sorry. We have to go out and play with it some more this afternoon, but we're actually getting two fields that we never thought we'd get water to this year. And listen, we're in much better shape than most because of our reservoir system and our irrigation delivery that we have set up over the last 20 years. But other people are not. And what this has done for us is it's taken my projection of about a 60%, give or take, you never know until it's done, hay crop off our last year record hay crop, which was about the only record set for 100 miles in any direction. And it's raised it to maybe 70, maybe 75%, which is great for the ranch. And it's great for people who are going to need hay because there's going to be a bunch of them and there's not going to be a lot of it out there. And we have cows coming in tomorrow being Sunday, which is 50 pairs. They'll be spending the summer with us, which is great, but there's all sorts of stuff we got to do with that. Make sure trailers aren't going over wet fields and making sure the cows get in where they got to get in and get them sorted. Make sure the calves are paired up properly with their moms. So that's tomorrow's escapade, shall we say. But I'm going to have some pictures posted here on the site, on the rightsideradio.com, and embedded in the videos, so you can take a look and you can see this spring snowfall, which by the way was beautiful, right? You have the green of the fields punctuated by these ribbons of white, freshly fallen snow. It was stunning. I think you'll like the photos. So that is the ranch story. It is kind of a blessing. And then we got a little bit more rain yesterday, which was not really expected, about 2/10 of an inch. And every 2/10 of an inch means something out here, particularly this year. And we're expecting some more this coming week. So things have changed just a little bit. Once again, not enough to dent the drought, but certainly helping us, certainly helping us. And you know, ranching is a weather contingent enterprise, as are many things, but ranching and farming particularly. All right, how about a quote? Okay, and apropos, since this is the last of our 5-part, or is it a 6-part, whatever, real estate series. And please go back and listen to the others if you did not. We had residential, we had rural lands, we had ranch and farm, or farm and ranch. Basically, we have covered the gamut of all the different types of real estate in all the different regions around the United States, at least on a eagle eye view. And you can do your own research after that. As always, we have articles and reference points posted on the website on the rightsideradio.com, so you can do further research if you wish. All right. There was a guy by the name of Louis Glickman, and he was a very famous real estate investor and philanthropist in New York City. 1905 to 1999, that was his lifespan. But one of the greatest real estate quotes, besides "under all lies the land," which is the NAR, is Louis Glickman's a quote from one of his books. "The best investment on earth is earth." Think about that. The best investment on earth is earth. I love that quote. All right, let's get started, shall we? First of all, we have a couple of little current events deals to bring you up to speed on, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. The Iran deal is the Iran deal is a mess, and I told you, pea on me, hayseed me, but I told you that doing this ceasefire was a mistake. I mean, when you have somebody on the ropes, you keep pounding him. You don't let him get up and catch his breath. And not starting the blockade 2 months ago rather than a month ago, or 3 months ago rather than a month ago, was a big mistake. And there's been several mistakes made in this conflict. The goal of the conflict is great. The fact that it had to happen is absolute. The fact that it should have happened, other than Obama didn't want it to happen, back when, is unquestionable, undeniable. But now we're in it. And there's all sorts of rumors flying around. I have several videos up for you. Once again, I'm not going to give you the blow by blow. Let's say the Hormuz Strait, the blockade is kind of semi working. There seems to be special deals for Chinese vessels. Who knows what's going on with all that stuff? China says they're not supplying Iran with any assistance, but they are. And Russia, of course, is right in on it because this is repay for what we've been doing in Ukraine, right? Thank you, Joe Biden and Barack Obama. In any event, there's rumors flying that there's a peace deal. How many times have we heard that over the last 2 months? And then there's rumors flying that conflict's going to start again tomorrow. How many times have we heard that over the last month or two? Let me give you my opinion and my advice. For whatever it's worth, you can take it or leave it. This thing is far from over. Even if there is some kind of outline of some peace agreement signed, the Iranians aren't going to keep it, and it's worthless. And if we don't start the stomping again, this is not going to end the way we want it to end. You know, another error was not arming the Iranians, 95% of the Iranian population who would like to see this regime booted out. And I can go on. But it's time to forget the errors, correct the errors, and go back to stomping until they say uncle, or until there's nobody left to say uncle. Now, maybe that's a warlock type position. Maybe that's not peace, love, dove. But you are not going to deal rationally with an irrational regime. It's just not going to happen. The regime has to go. And you need to be focusing your efforts on the regime going away, one way or the other, and far less on politics and the rest. You know, who knows what would have happened? But had we not had this quote unquote ceasefire, this conflict might be basically over by now. We've only prolonged it. Time is not the ally of the Iranians, but time is not the ally of the United States and Israel either. Okay? Time is the enemy of all. All right. Those are my thoughts on the chaos that's going on in the Mideast. And there's lots of other things we could talk about, but we're not going to. You can read about it on the website, on the rightsideradio.com. There's a bunch of videos posted from Israel, from the Arab countries. You'll get a pretty good feel for what's happening and what everybody's shtick is. You know, the viewpoints that everybody has because they differ. Gee, imagine that. There was a ruling by the Supreme Court which basically voided Trump's 10% tariffs. Remember, they said you can't do the big tariffs, and now they've come back and said you can't even do the 10% tariffs. Not a good ruling. Not a good ruling for the budget of the United States and income and import-export imbalances, and it ties the hands of an American president. You know, some tariffs are a potent weapon in the hands of a president, which could save using other potent weapons like, you know, F-35s. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But in another ruling, the Supreme Court kicked butt. It basically said that the redistricting maps by Texas and by several other red states stand, and it upheld the Virginia Supreme Court throwing out the Democratic redistricting of Virginia. That's huge. It gives us some hope. Remember, the midterms are less than 6 months away. What happens is up to you. Do I think we're going to get our butt kicked? I did. I'm not sure we're going to win, But these redistricting battles and the court cases that have supported the red states and not the blue states because of the different tacks that were taken by the states, not anything political, is a major pump, shall we say. And the margins of defeat and victory may be greatly lessened. And who knows? There's an outside chance if you get involved, folks, and you vote, and you get others to vote, and you contribute, and you get others to contribute, there's a chance we can pull this out of the fire. The Senate also is in play, and the same thing there. Under elections donations, the tab on the website on the rightsideradio.com, I have a whole bunch of donations you can make to both the House and the Senate. Literally, some are 50x. You put in $1 and there's $50 going to the campaigns. You put in $50 and there's $2,500 going to the campaigns. That's huge. Use this leverage while it exists. This is when the campaigns need money. They're setting up their ad buys, they're getting their ground forces going. You know, a week or two before election is very important, but right now is when the foundation is poured for the House that is the election. Get involved, folks. It's up to you and me. Up to you and me. There's nobody coming to help us. That's about all I'm going to do. I mean, there were a couple of woke stories. I think I'll bring them up in the next show. And by the way, the next show, don't miss it, because the next show is on the fraud that has been covered in 14 different states and counting, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer money. A great deal of it either by political people, oh, imagine that, corrupt politicians, or by illegal aliens. Yeah. Folks, you know that Biden and Obama's third term, brought into the country tens of billions, folks. It could get up to $500 billion. This is your tax money. And the government wonders why they have a problem with people paying taxes. Oh, yeah. Who would have thought? So we're going to have a whole show, the next one, on all these different circumstances of fraud in Minnesota, in Maine, in Virginia, in Maryland, in Florida, believe it or not. It will not make you happy, but you need to know about it so you can keep your eyes open for it on the home front. And you need to know about it because you need to be apprised of where your money is going. It's going into a sinkhole. I mean, if the fraud numbers get up to $500 billion, do you realize that's 25% of the budget deficit for a year for the United States? And we're going to talk about why this is happening. It's not just greed on the part of the fraudsters. It's not just ideology and politics on the part of the fraudsters. Those are ingredients. But it's also part of the Cloward-Piven theory. You don't have to have a revolution to bring down capitalism and freedom. You only have to overburden it with entitlements. Death by 1,000 paper cuts to the U.S. economy and U.S. financial structure. There's a much bigger game at play here in this fraud than just money, although money, of course, is the root of it all. All right, let's talk about real estate, shall we? In this fifth or sixth and final part of our real estate series, and I hope you have found it helpful. So, offices, first of all, the commercial real estate market, the rents that are paid, etc., is almost $2 trillion a year, $1.75 trillion a year. Think about that. That's huge. I mean, it's phenomenal. And did you know that offices, even though the offices are the worst sector of the commercial real estate market, offices are 29.1% share of that in 2025. 30% of that almost $2 trillion is just office rents that are paid. Believe it or not, California, for all the doomsayers, And California certainly has a lot of problems. But California has the largest single commercial real estate share of income and value of the entire United States, 21.1% in 2025. Of all commercial real estate rents and income, California was 21.1%. One state, 20%. We'll talk about why here in a moment. There's other places which are standouts. For instance, e-commerce and supply chains, which are obviously growing by leaps and bounds as retail, structural, brick and mortar retail recedes. 1.1% up in Texas, right? Texas had 475,000 new jobs that were in one way, shape, or form associated with industrial and logistics space, driven by e-commerce and supply chain needs. Needless to say, Texas industrial is booming, particularly in the Dallas, Fort Worth area. Mixed use properties seem to be the thing. They're doing better than almost any other component of the commercial real estate side. That's residential and retail, or residential and office, or a combination of the three. For instance, capital markets financing multi-use properties, mixed use properties, are up about almost 1%, 0.7%. Remember, this is trillions of dollars. 0.7% in Florida, Texas, and Arizona. Property tech and data analytics, right? Think data processing, think AI research, think all that kind of stuff. That has created a 0.5% increase in commercial overall in San Francisco, although its offices are down, and in New York and in Austin and Seattle. What's kind of interesting about this is San Francisco, Austin, Seattle, and New York are what? Blue areas. Think about that. So think about the stories that you hear, depending upon who you listen to, about how blue areas are total decline and collapse. It's not really what the stats say, okay? They're not doing as well in most cases, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, as the red states. But total collapse, no, not happening. Not happening. E-commerce, right? Go online, buy something from Joe Blow, Jeff Bezos, whoever. 16.3% of retail sales in the United States of America, up almost double over 5 years in 2025. And that generated a demand around the country for 250 million. Think about how big that is. 250 million square feet of new warehouse capacity. Nearshoring, which means bringing jobs back in and bringing distribution back in to the United States, added those 475,000. That's almost 500,000 people. That's almost more than the whole entire population of Wyoming, to Texas in 2025. And that's record industrial absorption, because all these people are working in the warehouses, the e-commerce, the distribution centers, you name it, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Multifamily. Now, look, I consider multifamily residential. A lot of real estate people consider multifamily commercial. We beg to differ. But just as a little glancing blow, because I did a whole show on multifamily, townhomes, condos, etc. a few shows ago. Please listen to it if you are anywhere in the United States and thinking about an attached dwelling of some type, or you have a relative that is. Multifamily transaction volume jumped across the United States 28% in 2025. I mean, that is phenomenal growth. 185 billion. This is people buying and selling, etc., apartment buildings, let's say. And institutional buyers in 2025, you'll find this fascinating, and you wonder why the price of homes isn't coming down. Institutional buyers, that's not you and me. It ain't Joe and Sally Mae. Uh, they bought 18% of single family homes. They accounted for 18% of the single family home transactions in targeted metro areas around the United States in 2025. Leasing velocity, that is the amount of square footage that is leased in various types of commercial, believe it or not, kind of went crazy in many markets across the United States in 2025 and the first quarter of 2026. In Manhattan, right? We're always joking about Kami Mandami and how everybody's leaving New York, etc. In Manhattan, 8.4 million square feet was closed in Q2 of 2025. Closed by, I mean leased, absorbed. Okay? Now, there's a caveat. Almost all of it was in Class A buildings. Class B and Class C buildings in all the metro markets that I looked at are struggling. I mean, huge vacancy rates, 15 to 40%. But the Class A buildings, depending upon which metro area, because real estate is a local thing, as we've discussed. I see I got dust on my work hat here. That, folks, that is actually increasing in absorption. More square footage is being leased in Class A space than in previous time periods. And that Class A space commands incredible numbers in terms of rent. We'll get into that in just a moment. It will astound you. I mean, it will just stagger you, particularly you, those of you who are out in suburban areas or small towns or rural areas, and you have a business and you're leasing a storefront or whatever you're doing. The rents that are being paid in big cities will just blow your mind. It'll blow your mind. There's restraints on this seeming acceleration in certain components of the commercial market, at least in certain metro areas in certain regions. Number one, rising interest rates, right? We talked about that here at the beginning of the show. The bond market, mortgage rates, commercial rates. Higher borrowing costs is slowing the deals that are being done because obviously people can't get financing. There's office sector headwinds because of what's called hybrid work, right? You work sometime in the office, you work sometime at home. And of course, we're all familiar with what happens starting with COVID, where people simply work from home. I mean, COVID did a lot of things, but one of the things it did was permanently, this is not temporarily, affect the commercial real estate market and affect residential real estate because you no longer had to be concerned with your commute. You could do it from your kitchen table. Huge, huge change in lifestyle. And this hybrid work reducing occupancy number, 0.5% of the entire San Francisco market down in 2025 in offices. Okay. Regulatory, and by the way, also similar percentages in New York, Chicago, and secondary, what's called CBDs, okay, which are smaller metropolitan areas. Regulatory compliance and ESG, gee, I thought that was gone. Requirements. That's making for more paperwork, more staff, more legal billings, more accounting, more, departments of this and departments of that and departments of compliance and interaction with government. I mean, the sooner we get rid of that stuff, 100%, the better. But that's creating operating complexity and additional costs. And that contributed, uh, by the way, this is from Mordor Intelligence, these particular set of numbers. That contributed to a 0.3% decline in leasing absorption in many of these major markets. Doesn't sound like a lot. It's huge. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of square feet. 0.3% is a millions of square feet that are vacant. Uh, Deal flow, okay, commercial mortgages. They average 6.4% in 2025. They're going up, okay? And that's going to affect costs, and that's going to affect occupancy, and that's going to affect residential. Basically, deal flow stayed 35% below. These are people transacting deals in commercial real estate. 35% below prior peaks in 2025 and the first part of 2026. And what's happening in a lot of deals right now is that they originally went into the deal with a floating rate, right? Everybody thought rates were going to come down. Now we're hearing rates might go up. Who told you rates would probably go up? Oh, that's right, that hayseed on the Cowboys take. That's 300 basis points, 3% above 2019. That's huge when you have, let's say, a $50 million mortgage or a $100 million mortgage on a big commercial building. Think about that. I mean, it's huge. $3 million a year in extra interest costs. And floating rate debt, which also was a large portion of these deals because people thought rates were going to be going down, is about 40% of the commercial mortgages that are out there. So think about what's going to happen as rates, if rates go up and landlords and owners are spending more and their vacancy rates are staying constant or going down. Not a good recipe. Not a good recipe. Regional banks, right? We just talked about that. Regional banks curtailed their lending to commercial properties beginning in like 2023. Remember when those banks went down, Signature, et cetera? Well, that created a hole. People couldn't get financing to build commercial buildings. One of the things, by the way, which is managed to keep vacancy rates, at least in some markets and some types of commercial, relatively okay. Because new buildings haven't been built because you can't get the financing to build them. And in steps, this will tie it all in for you, private credit. Oh, that private credit bubble that everybody's talking about. This is part of it. This is part of the private credit problem. Okay. $150 billion funding gap per year by the regional banks stepping out was filled by private credit type deals, which now people can't even get redeemed. Hybrid schedules, right? This is that hybrid work part at home, part at the office, or work from home. 68% of employers since COVID, right? Think about what a huge change this is in lifestyle and perceptions of Americans and the Western economies. 68% of employers cut utilization, that is the amount of time you're in the office, to 3.2 days per week average. 68%. I mean, that's not a little number. That is a structural shift in the way people work and the way employers conduct their businesses. That leaves, by the way, 20 to 25%. These are experts, not the hayseed here. 25% of existing office space, right, the B and C offices that we were just talking about, obsolete. They don't work anymore. They weren't designed for that type of low utilization. And particularly in the secondary metros, the vacancy rates are over 28% on the average in B and C office space. 28%. Trust me, folks, you cannot make a commercial project work at 28%, which means its value goes down, which means its financing gets, shall we say, a little rocky because its value has gone down, the loan to value has gone down, and the amount of income that's coming in to service debt ain't there. You can see that those problems are beginning to emerge and may emerge, shall we say, more sharply in the future. There are now a bunch of deals being done in B and C offices, particularly in secondary metro areas, where the concessions, this is a concession that the landlord gives a tenant to sign a lease, 22 years of free rent on a 10-year lease. That's 20% off the top of the entire lease value. 2 years free rent just to sign a lease. That'll give you an idea. San Francisco's vacancy climbed to 34.5%. 34.5%. And that's in apartments. That's because of cost. And that's because a lot of new units were built because they were financed by private credit. Oh, there we go again. All right. Office assets. Class A office space. Remember, we just talked about 28% plus vacancy rates in B and C buildings. Class A office space is kind of keeping its head above water at about 15% vacancy. Obviously, really nice buildings in premier locations like, Fifth Avenue in New York, they're at 95%. Once again, like land or like a house, it's location, 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 neighborhood, 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 right? Real estate is a local thing. So we're talking about broad trends here, and I'm giving you examples in specific markets. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't give a damn about what some guy is paying for office space in New York. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Because it filters through the entire economy, guy and gal, and it affects the rates you're paying and a whole bunch of other things. Okay. Logistics is the fastest growing property type. This is industrial now in the United States. Fastest growing property type, going up about 3.44% a year. That's huge. I mean, it's tens of millions of new square feet being built. And warehouse rents went up, unlike office rents, right? Warehouse rents went up an average of 7.4% across the United States last year. It's a big increase, big increase. On the multifamily side, and I'm going to talk about this in broad brush terms because, once again, I don't feel multifamily is part of the commercial market. I think it's part of the residential market. But individuals and households, in other words, the number of people looking for a place to live, is projected to expand at about 3.25% per year through 2031. And in studies that have been done, millennials and Gen Z actually favor rentals over ownership. Why is that? They're more mobile. They're not tied down. They don't have the costs of owning a home. They don't have to go deeply into debt because of the affordability crisis to own a home, and on and on and on. But it's affecting multifamily. And multifamily is overall doing pretty well around the United States. And it doesn't matter if you're in a small town or a big city. It does matter what neighborhood you're in, and it does matter as to the quality of the building, kind of like what you're seeing in office. All right, so a large portion of California's 21.1% of total commercial real estate in the United States has to do with AI leasing in the Silicon Valley. You know, you've heard about all those data centers, you've heard about AI. Well, here's an impact on real estate, never mind employment, never mind economy, et cetera, and GDP, but on real estate. Okay. Now let's talk about overall the big picture on commercial. You have office, you have industrial, you have retail. Some people throw in multifamily. I personally do not. You have a sub sector, which is hotels and hospitality. We're not going to go into that. It's a whole different shtick, if you will. I will tell you that hotels are only running at about an average of 59.9% occupancy, which is down about 20% from a year ago. That's because people are traveling less because gas costs more. COVID changed the world in commercial real estate, and for that matter, in residential real estate. AI exacerbates that change. AI means there's less people overall who are employed, which means there's less of a market that can pay top dollar for AAA buildings. Chicago, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Denver, all these areas, blue areas, in a way have been artificially buoyed, multifamily, industrial, and retail and office, have been artificially buoyed because it's tough to get permits. We talked about this in housing, right? The Northeast housing prices are remaining stable. In fact, actually going up in some areas because you can't find any land. Or if you find land, the regulations don't let you build on it. Or it takes you 2 years to get a building permit because of all the hoops you got to jump through. Well, the same thing is happening in these blue areas on the commercial side. So supply is limited. It's the only reason that those markets are remaining relatively strong. But nonetheless, they are remaining relatively strong. Zoning, regulations, tax, all these things enter into commercial, and for that matter, residential real estate. Office, to give you an idea, is an average of 20.2% vacancy around the United States. Pretty damn high. And once again, everything is local. And there's a difference between an A building and a C building, okay? And way different vacancy rates and way different prices. Absorption of office space overall, and I think this is a worrisome sign, is down 4%. There was 4% less square footage absorbed by tenants last year and the first part of this year than in the previous 12-month period. It's a pretty sizable reduction. The average office rent around the United States is $38.37 per square foot. Wow. There's office rents that range from $77 to $200 a square foot in New York and some of these major financial areas like San Francisco. I mean, think about that. If you have a 1,000 square foot office, it costs you $200,000 a year to have your office. Gee, I think I'll type at home. Thank you very much. Industrial. Industrial vacancy around the United States is low, 7% average. Once again, it can be zero in some areas. It can be 20% in others. $10.20 per square foot is the average rent paid for industrial warehouse type space. And there's a 7% where office has a 4% negative absorption trend. Industrial has a 7% positive absorption trend, which portends good things for the future. Retail. Retail has a 5.9% vacancy. I was really surprised at that number. I thought it would be higher. But once again, the restriction on construction, the financing restriction on construction, the high rates, is making up for the lack of demand, if you will, and the expansion of the market. Retail absorption is kind of like office. It's down 4.6% over the last year. And the average retail rent that's being paid is $25.48 a foot. You folks who are listening to me in smaller towns and rural areas and we'll call it little mini metropolitan areas like Cheyenne, let's say, or Fort Collins. You could think about what these costs are relative to yours to give you a sense, because these are averages. In multifamily, once again, just tipping my hat to those who say it's part of commercial, there were 65,200 new units absorbed by tenants over the last year. That's down slightly overall, but not by much. And in fact, overall, okay, this would count new units and existing units, absorption went up 9.4%. That's a huge jump. In other words, the amount of people renting apartments went up 10% over the last year, which also tells you something about affordability and housing and the availability of housing, or the availability of housing that people can afford. How's that? These numbers, by the way, were all from Cushman and Wakefield, one of the largest commercial brokers in the United States. Now, let's talk about some regions and areas that will be kind of familiar and maybe in your relative regional realm, if you will. Tulsa, Oklahoma, okay? Oil, right? Office vacancies are up to 10.5%. That's up 1% over the last year. Their industrial vacancy is below the U.S. average, which of course is 7%. In other words, their industrial is rocking, okay? Let's talk about Los Angeles. Don't groan. This is really interesting stats. Los Angeles is a huge, sprawling metropolitan area. It's actually divided, well, different folks divided into different components within that major metro area, but I think there's 5. Okay, there's Orange County, South Bay, Tri-Cities, San Fernando, Ventura, and Hollywood, Wilshire. And those of you who have been to California might be familiar with some of those names. So once again, this is how localized real estate is, including commercial real estate. In Orange County, okay, that submarket is down in overall commercial occupancy by 17%. South Bay down by 23.6%. Tri-Cities down by 28.9%. Now, this is overall commercial, all right? But when you get into vacancy rates in certain types of commercial, for instance, Class A office buildings, multifamily, once again, lumping it in with the commercial things, tip of the hat to those who do, and industrial, particularly industrial, vacancy rates are going down. This is in California. Everybody told you California is on the ropes and everybody's leaving and it's a ghost town. And apparently not. Statistics usually don't lie. Okay. Now, how much better would it be doing if it didn't have gruesome Newsom? Probably a lot better. But it's not doing as badly as everybody thinks. So, let's get rid of that. Hollywood, Wilshire. Okay, the entertainment industry is kind of on its butt. There's streaming and there's all that new stuff and not a lot of movies. And they have the worst vacancy rate, record high vacancy rate, and 32.4%. Now, that is a big friggin' vacancy rate, folks. Big vacancy rate. But the rest of the outfits, and once again, each type of commercial real estate, the quality level of each type of real estate, and the submarket within LA have varying statistics. Very interesting. Very interesting. A lot of what's fueling the buoyancy out there that there is in the California commercial real estate market is, lack of construction because of regulations. You know, it'd be nice to see the free market work once in a while or be allowed to work once in a while. Why don't we just say that? In New York City, we talked a little bit about office already, but in the outer boroughs around New York City, industrial's going nuts, crazy, right? You've heard about everybody leaving New York. Well, apparently not everybody is leaving New York. And retail vacancy is actually dropping in the immediate suburbs around New York. Really interesting statistics. I mean, I was surprised. I really was. Retail vacancy is dropping in Charlotte, North Carolina. Interesting. But office vacancy, even in the A buildings, is increasing in Charlotte, North Carolina. By the way, New York City, do you know how much office space they have? Take a guess. 11.78 million square feet of office. I want you to think about that for a moment, okay? Let's say it is 90% occupied. That'll give you about 10 million square feet. And let's say every office worker gets 50 square feet. Think about that. How many people that is. Now think about what happens if employers are reducing in-office work weeks to 3 days a week. What kind of effect does that have on retail? People not going into the office and buying their sandwich at lunch from the local hoagie store. I mean, everything is interdependent. It's fascinating. It really is. In Minnesota, oh yeah, fraudulent Minnesota. We'll be talking about them here in the next 3, 4 days, next show. Vacancy rates are rising in the suburbs in all facets of real estate. Multifamily vacancy rates are rising. Retail, industrial, office. And gee, I wonder why. It's such a well-run place, don't you think? Part of it might be that Somalis combined 30 businesses into one small building. You know, check cashing, wire, hospital, hospice, whatever. It's all in one building. So, you know, you don't need a lot of office space when you got 30 businesses in one in one building, right? Taking in the fraud money. Once again, that'll be the next show. All right, and it's not funny, but wow. By the way, in New York City, rents are up in office buildings by 2% in Class A office buildings. And the average rental price is $77.55 per square foot. Think about that. Think about what you're paying in your own small town or small metropolitan area that from which you are listening to me. Denver. Now, a lot of you are in the Rocky Mountain region. Denver. Retail has a 4.6% vacancy. That's really quite low, folks. And Denver has a very young market and they like to spend money. There is a correlation, right? Demographics play into what happens with retail also. The average rental for a square foot of retail in Denver is $21.47 per square foot per year. Office rents are actually up in Denver for Class A buildings in Class A locations to $33.51. And office has actually increased absorption to 1.9 million square feet per year. It's an awful lot. I mean, Denver's a big city anymore. From 1.7 million per square feet in the previous 12-month period. I found all these stats fascinating. It's not what I expected at all. Industrial, and this is surprising, in Denver, unlike almost any other major metro area, is down to 7.4%. Really interesting. 4.46 million square feet, despite that, in Denver, Colorado, 4.46 million square feet of warehousing, remember, e-commerce, distribution, supply chain, was absorbed over the last 12 months. I mean, that is like a pile of square footage, a pile of square footage. So I hope that gives you kind of a very general feel and taste for the commercial markets around the United States. Let me emphasize that if you are starting a small business, thinking of moving your offices, negotiating with a landlord, your local market is your local market. It's not New York, it's not San Francisco, it's not Dallas, and the local markets have their own price structures when it comes to residential, when it comes to land, and when it comes to commercial. So make sure you do your research and find out what's being paid for A, B, and C office space, mixed use projects versus straight retail projects. And obviously, in terms of retail, exposure, location, and layout and anchor are key things to think about if you're going to be starting your store. And in industrial, think about what's happening in your area. Are AI centers being built? Is your center at the crossroads of a major transportation hub, railroads, interstates, all that kind of stuff? In that case, you can probably look forward to industrial growing because, folks, e-commerce, supply chain, and distribution are just going to continue to grow. And brick and mortar store sales are, unfortunately, most likely going to continue to fall. And then interpolate all that into what effect that has on the housing market in your area, and therefore your house or your ability or desire to rent or to own a place. Because it's all linked together, all interwoven. Anyway, that concludes our real estate series. And I am very much looking forward to bringing you this upcoming show on fraud because I absolutely, positively guarantee you will not be happy and you will be boggled. You will be gobsmacked, as the Australians say, by the numbers I'm going to bring you. And it's not just one or two things. It goes on and on and on and on. And it is really, really upsetting. And it is tearing at the fabric of this country, and it is tearing at the finances, as I think it was designed to do, of this country. While people are getting rich with the hard-earned dollars you write out every April 15th to the United States government and state governments who care nothing about you. Zippo, zero, nada. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. Keep the wind at your back. We'll talk to you shortly.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.